Let's talk about hydrofracking. Obviously, a big issue.
It is.
Being discussed statewide, mainly because of the Marcellus Shale
That's right.
and the possible benefits of that. Discuss the moratorium that was passed in the state
Sure.
Senate. Your thoughts on that, and your views in general of hydrofracking.
Sure, it's actually a bigger issue than I think a lot of us would have imagined if we were sitting here talking even a year ago, certainly 2 years ago. Much bigger than I think many of us would have imagined. The issue of hydrofracking or hydraulic fracturing, which is a technique used to get at relatively extensive natural gas deposit located from roughly this portion of the state of New York south down into Pennsylvania and West Virginia and over into Ohio. It's become a very controversial technique that is used in Pennsylvania and some other states that has pros and cons associated with it. On the pro side, the issue of weaning ourselves from from foreign sources of energy is something I think we have to continue to be very aggressive with. And not to get off on another topic, but the focus in recent years on alternative energy, renewable energy, windmill, solar, hydro. I think we have to continue to be ever more aggressive in focusing on renewable energy, and I think we will be as a society in the state and really in the nation. But the issue of tapping into these natural gas reserves, while there are potential economic benefits to communities that have been hit very, very hard over the years, particularly in the southern tier portion of the state of New York, I have become very concerned, and frankly, many of my constituents have. This year, I received more mail on the issue of hydrofracking than any other issue except the budget itself. People very, very concerned about their drinking water, and they should be. And we have to make sure that when we move forward and issue permits, the State Department of Environmental Conservation issues permits to gas companies to hydrofrack and use those chemical mixtures to get at that gas. We have to make sure it's absolutely as safe as possible. So I, in this recently concluded regular session of the legislature, became very convinced that a moratorium on the permitting process was the right thing to do here in New York State. So we have passed a bill in the Senate with bipartisan support that places in effect a moratorium until May of 2011. Moratorium meaning no permits issued from New York State DEC. Now, that moratorium is not in effect because the Assembly hasn't taken the bill up yet. And I'm hoping that when the legislature returns this fall, they'll put the bill on the floor, not only because I think it's the right thing to do, it's also a good thing from a government perspective, as we were discussing earlier. Let's put a bill on the floor and find out where members of the Assembly stand on the question of hydrofracking. I think their constituents deserve to know. So I'm hoping the Assembly will take it up, hoping that at that point the governor would sign it into law, and it would at least allow us to have additional time to make sure what we are doing is as safe as can be. That gas isn't going anywhere. There's no need to rush into a process until we're completely satisfied. Not that accidents don't happen, but we need to do everything we can to make sure that accidents don't happen because the stakes are simply too high. When we're talking about people's drinking water, as far as I'm concerned, that's nothing we want to fool around with.
Let's shift to some campaign questions. What have you learned traveling around the district? Talking to voters. I guess what big issues do you hear about, and what things do you just learn in general about the geography or other things about
it? Well, it's a challenging and great opportunity to represent a district such as the 49th. When you look at it on a map, you realize, I think pretty quickly, much of the district is very rural in nature. And I've had an opportunity in many ways, including one that we discussed earlier in regard to the farm worker bill, to represent the rural areas of my district, focusing on agriculture, focusing on, for example, the wine industry, the wine and grape industry as an increasingly important segment of the agricultural industry, and being able to sponsor and lead through the legislative process a number of pieces of legislation to encourage the continued development and growth of the wine and grape industry, which is critical here in the Finger Lakes. Certainly have very urban-specific issues in the city of Syracuse, the portion of the city of Syracuse that I represent, that present great opportunities to represent a district as diverse as the 49th district. I think as you travel around, I think though that there are some common themes, certainly that I have been hearing. Many of them we've already touched on. Got to do something about taxes. And when people talk about taxes, they usually share with me their frustration over property taxes. And we talked about why I think the property tax cap is so important. They talk about jobs, the economy, and their ability to have a future here in central New York. And we talked about some of the ways that we can make positive change in regard to our economic climate. We talked about hydrofracking. It's actually been surprising the number of places that I go where people, despite how difficult the economy is, the tax burden that so many of us have, many people will come up to me and the issue that they want to talk about is, Dave, we got to make sure our drinking water is safe. And not to repeat the previous answer to your question, but it's been very eye-opening as I travel around the district how important that is to constituents. So these are the issues that I hear about, and frankly, traveling around the district. This is not limited to a campaign. This is what I do throughout the entire 2-year process, because I really believe that getting out into communities across the 4 counties, listening to constituents, listening to their issues, that's the way that you're able to provide better representation. In my case, in Albany, in the state legislature. I believe that's the case regardless of the level of government that one might serve. You've got to be able to listen, understand the things that you're hearing by way of feedback from your constituents, and try to the best of your ability to act on those on those issues. When we're in a difficult economic climate like this, it means difficult decisions are going to have to be made as it relates to funding for schools and health care and so on and so forth. But we have had to this year, and I believe certainly that we're going to have to again focus on balancing budgets, closing budget deficits with reductions in spending this year, holding the growth of the state budget below the rate of inflation for the first time in a generation. We have to continue to make those kinds of decisions, fiscal decisions, so that when we emerge from this national economic recession, we'll be stronger as a state, and therefore much better able to have a solid economic future.
Next question. Obviously, you have an opponent in this race, Andrew Russo. What do you think of your opponent and your chances against him in November?
I think that this year voters are concerned. I think they're frustrated, certainly, with primarily because of the economic uncertainty that so many families make. They know we're in difficult times. They know more difficult decisions are to come, and I think those are the kinds of things that they are looking at or will be looking at when they go to the polls. I think as you look at the 49th Senate race, as in I think any race that is on the ballot this year, I think it's important for people to look at the candidates, and in my case, look at a legislator who is standing up for what's right for people upstate, standing up for reform of a process in Albany, standing up even if it means calling on members of your own political party to say enough is enough. This is going to stop. It's time to change the culture of Albany, and that's something that I have been doing. I've been a part of the reform process, and I'm anxious to continue to do that. Mr. Russo, certainly don't know him very well, but certainly brings his background to the table. I think it's important to look at experience when it comes to choosing our elected officials, and I think I would hope that voters would look at, again, knowing the difficult decisions that need to be made, looking at someone who's been making those tough decisions, who will work with the next governor to make difficult decisions in regard to budget and where we go in the future. I think I present the best opportunity for the future of Central New York in terms of the 49th Senate District.
My last question for you. There's this talk of an anti-incumbent wave. Does that concern you at all this year, getting swept up in that?
I don't know if it concerns me necessarily. I think, again, it's important for voters to choose on November 2nd, regardless of what level of government they're going to vote for. Look at the kinds of actions that their elected officials are taking, the bills that they sponsor, the laws that they enact, the things that they say and do in terms of reform, certainly in Albany, and then make their decisions based on those kind of factors. So I think that in the final analysis, I have always maintained that when it comes to reform in Albany, it's reform of a process. We've made great progress. We have a long, long way to go. There's no question about that. But also the opportunity to serve, as I have in the state Senate, also means listening, as we've talked about, and trying to reflect the interests of constituents across the state. But it also means providing the highest quality constituent service that we can possibly provide. So when we receive calls and emails and letters into the district office, that we do everything we can to help that individual with whatever issue they might have, with whatever problem they may have. We're not always going to be successful. We're not always going to be able to solve an issue that they might have. But for me, knowing that we've done our best is frankly our responsibility to do everything we can, particularly in difficult times, to be of assistance to whoever might need it.